Did you know that when you activate an EPIRB offshore, you're not just sending out a radio signal and hoping that someone hears it. You're actually talking directly to a global satellite search and rescue system called COSPAS SARSAT, and it's been quietly operating in the background since 1982, just like me. And since then, that system has been credited with over 19,000 real rescue events, helping save more than 63,000 people worldwide. That's not a projection, it's not marketing, those are documented rescues. In recent years, the system processes roughly 3,000 genuine distress alerts every year, which works out to about 8 real emergencies every single day. Ships, aircraft, and people who very suddenly found themselves in situations that they didn't plan for. And that's possible because EPIRBs transmit at 406 megahertz, a digital frequency, which is monitored globally by satellites whose only job is to listen for one thing, a signal that says something has gone seriously wrong. Now there's no cell towers, no VHF limits, no one guessing if anybody's listening, just satellites, rescue coordination centers, and a rapidly shrinking search area. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll explain exactly how an EPIRB activation turns into a rescue, how the satellites actually find you, how long it takes, and why two boats in nearly identical situations can have completely different outcomes depending on how they set their EPIRB up. Because offshore sailing safety isn't about being afraid of the ocean. It's about understanding how far away help really is, and what bridges that gap when something does go wrong. Today, we're building a real offshore sailing safety checklist, not the legal minimums, not the glossy catalog fantasy version, the stuff that actually matters when you're tired. It's dark, the weather's turned against you, and Plan A has very clearly stopped returning your calls. And before we talk about equipment, we need to start with the most important offshore safety rule of all. Staying on the boat is always better than falling off the boat. That sounds obvious. It isn't. Most people who end up in the water didn't mean to. They slipped, they stumbled, they went forward at night to fix something real quick, and suddenly the boat is sailing away from them faster than they can swim in conditions that aren't optimal. That's why offshore sailing starts with the life jacket you actually wear, not the one buried in a pile of dock lines. For offshore sailing, this means an inflatable PFD with an integrated harness and proper leg or crotch straps, reflective material, a whistle, and ideally a spray hood. This is not the place for the ancient foam vest that's been living on the boat since the Cold War. The harness matters because the life jacket keeps you alive after you fall overboard. A harness helps prevent you from falling overboard in the first place, which leads directly to tethers and jacklines. Jacklines run fore and aft on the deck so you can clip in whenever you leave the cockpit, at night, in rough weather, or anytime things feel even slightly less than perfect. Yes, they're annoying. Yes, you'll occasionally forget you're clipped in and attempt to walk farther than physics allows. Yes, this will make you feel foolish. That mild embarrassment is still vastly preferable to becoming a very quiet man-overboard incident offshore. Use a double tether, one short and one long, so you can move safely without ever unclipping in really bad situations. And clip in early, not once things are already spicy. Now let's talk about the thing people always say they'll buy before the big trip. We mentioned it earlier, an EPIRB. An EPIRB is not a radio, it's not a flare, it doesn't rely on someone being nearby or paying attention. It's directly plugged into that COSPAS SARSAT satellite system we talked about earlier. When you activate it, satellites detect the signal. That signal includes a unique digital ID, which points back to you and your boat. If the EPIRB is properly registered, and it absolutely should be, rescue authorities immediately know what vessel's in trouble, how many people might be on board, and who to call for more information. That alone can shave hours off a rescue. Closely related, but not the same thing, are personal AIS or PLB devices. These clip to your life jacket and activate if you go overboard, broadcasting your position to your own boat and to nearby vessels. These are the life jackets you'd probably keep put away inside until you're doing some real offshore work because you don't want them to accidentally get wet. These are excellent. They're not a replacement for an EPIRB though. Think of them as seat belts, and the EPIRB is the airbag. Next up is communication. At minimum, you want a fixed mount VHF radio with DSC connected to GPS and registered. That gives you one button distress calling with position data. You also want a handheld VHF, of course, floating, waterproof, charged up, because offshore redundancy isn't paranoia, it's planning. Navigation needs backups too. You need paper charts of where you're going, a spare tablet, something that still works when the main plotter decides today's the day it's going to retire. Now let's talk about something nobody likes to think about, the life raft. Big expensive thing. An offshore rated life raft is bulky. It takes up huge amounts of space that you'd probably rather use for something fun like paddle boards. It's also the thing you climb into when the boat that's been your entire world is no longer viable. If you're sailing genuinely offshore, not day sailing or coastal hopping or trickling through the Bahamas, a properly sized service life raft is part of the conversation. And if you have a life raft, you need a ditch bag. Not a bag you promise yourself you'll throw together later. A bag that's already in existence, packed, ready, grab it and go. Should have some water in it, handheld VHF, batteries, signaling gear, medication, copies of your important documents, the things you'll desperately wish you had 5 minutes after watching your boat sink. Man-overboard recovery is another place where theory and reality often part ways. We do it in the racing world a lot, but you need throwable flotation, a recovery sling or device, and most importantly, a plan. Who's going to stay on the helm? Who keeps an eye on the person in the water? How do you get somebody back on board when they're exhausted and heavy and full of water and the boat's still moving? If you've never practiced this, offshore is not the place to figure it out. We do it constantly in racing. Now let's have a look at the boat itself. You want to make sure you have bilge pumps. We did an episode on this recently, and yes, plural, pumps. Electric and manual. You want to know where they are and how to service them and how to make them work when things are loud, wet, and stressful. You also want those wooden bungs to plug holes. You want fire extinguishers in sensible places, not all buried under the companionway steps, and you want them inspected and ready to go. Go look at your fire extinguishers right now and check the little dial to make sure they're serviceable. You want to know your emergency steering system actually works too. Where's the emergency tiller right now? How does it attach? How do you get the cover off? Whether it clears the cockpit floor or not. These are not things that you want to discover for the first time during a failure. Figure it out the next time you're on your boat. And cutting tools. Not just bolt cutters to cut the rigging if you get demasted, but real knives that are accessible from the cockpit and on deck. Lines under load don't negotiate. They need to be cut. Lighting matters too. A lot of people forget that. It's going to be nighttime when things go wrong. Headlamps with red mode are one of the most underrated offshore tools that there is. Your hands free, your night vision's intact, and fewer accidental self-inflicted disasters when you can see. And finally, let's talk about comfort, because it's not just fluff. Good foul weather gear, warm layers, sailing gloves. Staying dry and warm offshore isn't about luxury, it's about judgment. Cold, exhausted people make bad decisions. Dry, rested people solve problems. Now let's deliver on that promise we made at the beginning. Here's what most sailors don't actually know about EPIRBs. When you activate a modern EPIRB, two things happen. First, the beacon transmits that 406 MHz digital distress signal to the COSPAS SARSAT satellites. That signal includes your beacon's ID, and if it's registered properly, rescue authorities instantly know who you are and what boat they're looking for. Second, and this is critical in a difference between old EPIRBs and new EPIRBs, modern EPIRBs with built-in GPS transmit your exact position as part of the original signal. Older beacons without GPS rely on something called Doppler shift, where satellites calculate your position based on how the signal changes as they move overhead. It works, but it can take multiple satellite passes, and the initial search area can be several square miles. With GPS, that search area shrinks to something closer to a football field. Two boats can activate EPIRBs on the same day in the same conditions and have completely different outcomes, simply because one beacon was registered, tested, and GPS enabled, and the other one wasn't. That's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. An EPIRB isn't just a box you bolt onto the boat and forget about. It's a system. Registration matters. Battery dates matter. Knowing how and when to deploy it matters. Is it a manual EPIRB or an automatic EPIRB? And when everything else has gone wrong, when the radios are silent, when the lights go out, when the plan is completely unraveled, that little beacon is often the only thing still doing exactly what it was designed to do. That's why, since 1982, COSPAS SARSAT has been credited with over 19,800 rescues and 63,000 lives saved. Not because sailors are reckless, but because the ocean doesn't offer second chances. Only preparation helps. Offshore safety isn't about fear, it's about respect. Respect for distance, for weather, for the reality that help may be very far away unless you bring it with you. The goal offshore isn't bravery, the goal is coming home in one piece. And while we're on the topic, did you see the article we posted called Safety Tether Caution? Practical sailor testing of snap hooks and fixed clip-in points reveals how poor attachment design and user error can defeat even the strongest safety systems. This is a great article if you're getting ready to do some offshore work. I'll leave a link in the description for you. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us out, but also it lets YouTube know that you like sailboat videos, so it'll show you more of them. How cool is that? Also, hit subscribe so I can see you again next time.